All right, we are here with Rob Mudd from Element Design Build, and we're going to do some Q&A today. We're here live at Three Pumps, which is really cool. This is a project Rob did, and he's going to kind of walk through some things as far as like this whole build-out process that we're talking to today. I just want to give Rob a little chance to talk about his company, the kind of stuff he's done with breweries, and we'll go from there.
Rob, thank you. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Rob. This is kind of my home away from home. Not that I spend a lot of time here, but I sure as hell did when we were building it. My company, as Matt said, is Element Design Build. We're a general contractor, but we also do structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing MEPs, brewery-specific MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering, which is the MEP. You'll learn the acronyms as you get into it, building these things. We really get in early in the process. We like to meet our clients before they even lease a space if possible. We'll go through, we'll look at multiple spaces for them, help them kind of project, do some space planning, see what they can accommodate. And also, as far as one of the things that they need to work into their plan in their selection of the location is what the city requires as far as manufacturing space, which is front of house or occupied space. Here in Chula Vista is 49%. And so that's why our tasting room is kind of laid out the way it is, because the city really required this main square footage area, the area that the public has access to, be limited to 49%. It also keeps our occupancy low so with fire sprinklers. It's another consideration.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah.
So you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about this specific build?
Sure.
We're going to show some video clips of it later, but like some of like the challenges or kind of how you guys got a brewery in the basement.
Yeah, well, that was fun. And I'll try to find the video. We actually had some drone footage. We did it. We also had some shots of when Rob did equipment in. But this building was built in the 50s, 60s. Initially, it was purpose-built as a men's department store. Yeah, there's two stores. There's a space upstairs, which is where they basically had their storeroom. There was a conveyor belt system that ran, the dumbwaiter that ran everything up and downstairs, and then there was a conveyor belt system down to the basement. So it was kind of convoluted, but this was the main showroom. They had their tailors upstairs as well. And it was the Highlander that's up on the wall. That was the name of the company that was here before, or originally built the space. And then it was the Highlander until I think the late 70s. And then it changed hands a few times. It was a skate shop. I think it was a head shop at one point in time. There was a legal church downstairs at one point. And then when we took it over, it was a warren of small for rent offices. None of them were legal. There were a lot of issues here. So when we came in, basically we scraped everything. Took it literally down to the studs. And as we were getting into it, I'm a Chula Vista boy, so the Highlander, I remember coming down to 3rd Avenue, my dad would come get like a soup here. Right. And so I had a soft spot for Chula. So as we were going through, we tried to save as much as we could. And so really the back wall there, those are the floorboards underneath this area we cut out for the brewery. The drink rails all along, these were actually the 4 joists that were in here. Nice. The bar is made from the drop ceiling that was up overhead. It was a plaster ceiling. It was all framed with 2x3s. We saved all those, glued them together as a bar top. This drink rail here at the street side with the rollers, this was the conveyor belt. They used the material in and out. So yeah, we tried to save as much as possible we could and repurpose it. Keep our footprint down, but also try to keep some of the literal history. As far as putting a brewery in a basement, I don't recommend it. It's a great use of space, and if you're able to lease a space and get that as kind of value add, by all means do it. We've done 2 breweries with basement spaces, one being Resident, who actually brew on the ground floor, but they have an adjacent cellaring area that's a box and whatnot. That is in the basement. When they leased their space, that was free square footage. They worked out their lease, they didn't pay for that. Here, in this location, it was rentable square footage, but it wasn't at the same premium rate they paid for the street side. Even then, theoretically, it's free square footage. Cutting a giant hole in the floor, not hard, but keeping the floor above you when you do that is the challenge. So we've got about $100,000 just in steel to keep the dance floor where it is and not to keep the adjacent buildings where they are, because we're subterranean and they are. So we have to shore everything up.
And we'll go down there and we'll kind of show the steel here in a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna talk about some like these open concepts that you see at a lot of the newer breweries with these garage doors on the street front. So we'll let Rob talk a little bit about maybe like what you've seen when it used to be like, hey, let's just put some kegs as stools, industrial style breweries, to like what you're seeing now in like the tasting rooms.
Originally, like when Miramar was first popping off and Hess had the original brewery up there, coil style roll up doors is what everybody had. They're cheap, they're industrial, they take a beating. They're not very friendly. They don't let any light in. And so what we decided to do was, we started about 5 years ago. No, we weren't the first ones to do it, but a lot of people have. Is put the glass doors in. So it's aluminum frame. It's essentially a similar hardware style to what you have on a sectional roll-up door in your garage, but it's all anodized aluminum, tempered glass. These have a tint on them and also an anti-graffiti film on the outside. They go in relatively quick. They're all custom. There's not one just on a shelf someplace, so it doesn't matter what size you order. It's going to be about the same lead time. You pay per square foot. They're relatively expensive if you consider how much bang for your buck you get. They really open the space up. They bring a ton of daylight in, plus fresh air. One thing I recommend is putting a trigger on here so when the door is open, your HVAC system shuts off, so you're not conditioning the outside. So bringing the equipment into the brewery was a challenge. It's a 2-day process. We had 3 flatbed trucks lined up down 3rd Avenue, 1 with equipment and 2 with all the brewery equipment. I'm sorry, movie equipment, 2 with the brewery equipment. Everything had to be brought in through these 2 doors, hoisted up, and then dropped down. But everything that you see in the brewery had to come in a specific order because it's like putting a puzzle together. Nothing can move around once it's in place. We have about 2 inches between fermenters. Ordinarily, you have somewhere between 12 and 18 inches. But due to size constraints, we tucked everything in here as close as we possibly could get it. All the utilities run behind the fermenters to keep it nice and tight down there. So you'll see a ton of electrical. Our glycol loop runs behind there. Distribution for the cold water and the process piping. And then the rest of it is run overhead, and you'll see that when we go down below. Glycol chiller just kicked on, so apologize if I'm yelling at you. But if you pan up, you'll see the boost start rack running the entire thing down here. We try to treat it like we would working in a ship. So we gave everybody a path. Everybody had to stay in their lane. Otherwise, it would have just been a crisscross nightmare down here. We've got our electrical on one side. We've got our piping on the other. Watch this thing here. Trench drain. Going back in here. Got our hot cold liquor tanks. Tucked in, 30 barrels each. I can't believe this tape is still on here 6 years later, but it is. When we brought everything in, the first thing I had to come in was the glycol chiller. We had to tuck it away. Then we had to slide these 2 bad boys in place. The hot and cold liquor tanks, those had to come in and get anchored down. And then we were able to start bringing the bright tank and the fermenters in it. The last piece of the puzzle was the brew house, and it was brought down in 4 sections. Brought it down, assembled it in place. Because really, once we got down here, there was no room to move these things. All these things had to come in, be stood up through the hole, and as you can see, like I said, there's hardly any daylight. You can see all of our pipe array back there. So I mentioned the steel earlier. So the main reason for the expenses, honestly, is the engineering. It's more about keeping our neighbors to the north and south where they are and not allowing those walls to collapse into the basement space than it is to keep the floor suspended, because this was always a basement, this was always a suspended floor. The structure itself is absolutely sound, but what we had to do was basically build a skeleton within the framework that was already here to shore up our neighbors on both sides, because those are two-story buildings also, but they're sitting on grade, and all that weight would have been crashing through the top of your pocket.
So one of the biggest questions we get is about concrete in a brewery, what type of flooring, what type of slope, the trench drain or the drain. So if you want to just speak a little bit on what you're seeing as far as flooring in breweries.
Okay. Let's start with the concrete. And so depending on the brewery you're looking at, these are 20-barrel fermenters. It's a 10-barrel brew house. This slab is, I think, 8 inches thick, if I remember correctly. We have our trench drain. Our 8 inches extends around and below the trench drain. The trench drain cannot take away from that structural capacity. We have a few structural footings that are punched through, and those footings extend below the slab. The slab in this location, for cost purposes, we kept it as tight as we could. This area here is pitched 1/4 inch per foot, which allows for natural flow. The kind of original concrete is spalled and there's some stress cracking now. This is around 4 inches thick in most locations. It's fine for most uses. So as far as the slope that you want 1/4 inch per foot if you can get it. 1/8 inch per foot is adequate, which basically means over an 8-foot section you have a 1 inch drop. You want that to slope towards your trench drain or towards your floor drain for obvious reasons. The flatter it is, the more time you'll be on the screws, and the harder it is to keep things clean. In a perfect world, you can do all the concrete, come in and slope everything to your trench drains. Costs being what they are, and everybody having a realistic budget, you have to kind of pick your spots. And concrete is one of those things that isn't necessary, but also you don't want to spend 60 grand on a new slab if you can avoid it. So you put it where you have to have it, and you make everything else work.
What would you speak to as far as like other things than concrete, as far as like flooring solutions that you see?
Make sure you get a structural engineer on board. They're going to let you basically help you sleep at night. Make sure you have that way you've got your mechanical connections proper. You're not trying to put something that's too heavy on a slab that's not designed for it. And also, a couple of inches concrete now, if you pour for future growth, it'll save you hundreds of thousands of dollars later. So if you're coming into a space that will allow you to grow, and you're coming with a 10-barrel system and you want to move up, plan for that bigger system with your infrastructure if you can. If your concrete is very loose, you don't want to open that up later. As far as floor finishes,
Yeah.
the most durable, the best one out there right now is Kataroa. Their ceramic tile, it's just beautiful. No slam against North Park. I think Kelsey was the first one to do it. And it's beautiful too. It holds up really well. It's not cheap. But it does, at the end of the day, it looks fantastic. It's essentially bulletproof. The go-to for years was epoxy. Basically just a 2-part chemical process. There's a lot of prep work involved in making it right. Anybody can put epoxy down, but to do it right, you really got to grind it, open up that concrete, allow the epoxy to get into it and lock in place. Over the years, multiple projects come about. This is a polyaspartic product, which is holding up. You'll see the color differences, and it looks like this is wet and that's dry, but they're both actually just as wet. It's just you've seen a lot more caustic than this has. And so with brewery flooring, your two main concerns are chemicals and thermal shock. And essentially thermal shock is you're taking it from concrete typically wants to be around 55, 65 degrees. And then if you're dumping 140 degree water at it, the flooring, that quick difference is usually enough to make lesser flooring products pop. They'll actually release from the substrate. The polyaspartic, the epoxy, and a few other products that are out there now are built to take that quick temperature change and not fail on you. Occasionally you will have some small cracking, some small spalling, and that's can be fixed. But if you start having big areas that are flaking away, you'll need a proper installation, and it's time to rethink it.
So now we're going to talk about the permit and inspection process, kind of how that looks from the start, and kind of how COVID's changed that a little bit as well.
All right, so obviously you need a building permit. Your building permit is going to be comprised of depending on what part of the county you're in. City of San Diego, you're going to have your building permit, also separate permits for electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and fire if you need it. City of Chula Vista, La Mesa, some of the other larger municipalities, they just do the one permit, everything's rolled in there. And as far as inspections, the biggest advice I can give you is make sure your work's tight before your inspector comes out. Don't let him go through and start picking your work apart, because the first time that happens, he will look twice as hard the next time. I'm not saying you want to go over on anybody, but you want to make sure your work is clean, get them in and out as quickly as you can so you can carry out the work. I used to start projects before permit pretty regularly. That's changed the last 3 years. I don't recommend it because these cities are a little haphazard due to COVID as far as plan check. They're decentralized. Some people are working from home. Some portions of your permit review will be outsourced. So you don't really know what they're going to flag. They may pick up on things that you weren't even aware of, even if you're an experienced builder. You just don't really know what they're going to flag. So my recommendation is wait until you have a permit, or at least it's being ready to be issued. You know you've avoided all the hurdles. Then start work. That should be fine, but don't cover anything. Most of the cities will allow you to do your demo, dig your trenches, and even go as far as doing non-structural framing and run electrical and mechanical, things of that nature, as long as nothing can be covered up and nothing's being put under pressure or energized until you've had an inspection.
All right, and the biggest question everyone wants to know is, how much is it going to cost as far as my build out? Sometimes people do the 1-to-1 rule, however much I'm spending on my equipment is how much I'm spending on build out. But I know we're in a different time here in 2022, and what can you tell people, like if they're asking a general question about cost?
Yeah. The most honest answer I can give you is be prepared to spend at least twice as much as you think you're going to, and have a surplus beyond that, because especially right now, and this 18-month cycle we're in right now is the most volatile I've ever seen as far as pricing. I've been doing this 30 plus years, 20 on the commercial construction side, and I've never seen pricing as bananas as it is right now. Not only on the trade side, but also just materials and lead times and all these things just make your work just to build the project infinitely harder. And it takes what should be a 17 to 20 week build, and it can make it a 7 or 8 month deal. It's no joke. So as far as actual costs, what you can plan for, Matt just mentioned the 1-to-1 rule. That was the rule of thumb years ago. It seems like an eternity ago, but it really was kind of when the first group of brewers was coming up. And if you were running out of an industrial space straight out of a warehouse, you could do the 1-to-1. You are going to have to upgrade your utilities, almost guaranteed, wherever you're at. Minimum for a 2-barrel system, 3/4 inch water line, 4 inch sewer line minimum. Electrical, you can squeeze by on 200 amps. Be very careful. I'd shoot for 400 amps of 120, 240 power. If you're able to get three-phase, which I recommend, that's easier on your equipment, it's going to cost you less in the long haul. Get the three-phase power. You can always step it down if you need to. If you're going into an older industrial space, it should already have three-phase. Your build costs, back to the 1-to-1, yeah, if you're spending $100,000 on your space, on your equipment, and your space is any more than 1,000 square feet, I don't know that you're going to get it done. We're looking at about $100 to $200 square foot right now, and that's coming in, demoing the space, all the infrastructure, building out a next tasting room, and that number just 5 years ago was an absolute insane. We're looking at material costs from lumber to copper and even stainless and aluminum, for that matter, have doubled and tripled just in the last 3 years, which makes it really hard to project what your costs should be. Yeah, it's a tough time to be looking to start a brewery with that, unless you have really deep pockets or a really rich uncle.
Right.